All right. Happy Friday, everybody. I am Christopher Lind, and welcome back to another future-focused weekly update where if I am doing my job well, I am keeping you 10 steps ahead of what's happening at the intersection of business, technology, and the human experience, and hopefully not just keeping you ahead of what's going on, but helping you make sense of it and knowing what to do with it. So if you're a new listener or whatever, I hope you enjoy this. I hope it adds value to you. If you've been following me for a while, thank you. I really enjoy the community that's been built around this. Regardless of whether you're new or been here for a while, I am going to consistently encourage you to please like, share, comment, hit the notification bell, subscribe, all those things to help others find it, to also just help it make its way around. So thank you for that. Let's jump straight into it. I've got my 4 updates that I'll run through. The first one being, if you have not heard, Google is planning on rapidly deploying its new Google AI mode. Now, you may think, what are you talking about? I always see when I Google something, there's a little AI summary at the top. This is not that. This is them taking it a step further. And, at the top of Google, there's images, news, that. There's actually going to be a new tab, AI mode, which my guess is it's going to end up being the default. And that's where things are going to be. And so really, it's going to be almost a conversational type interaction with search, so that instead of just searching, getting results, you're going to get that AI mode version, but you can continue to interact with it. You'll be able to continue to have a conversation and get more and more results around it. So the big key there is it's going to be more of a conversational interface versus what we think of traditionally with search, where you search for your thing and then you get your list of results and you kind of have to dig into it. Like I said, they've enhanced it already with kind of a brief summary of what that is up at the top, but this is going to go take it a step further. And that involves a whole bunch of enhancements like visual integrations into it. So it'll pull little thumbnail images up of the different things for different cues, visual cues for displaying different, ratings, information. It's going to bring that up. So it's going to bring all of that together using their new Gemini 2.0. I don't know how new Gemini 2.0 is, but it's integrated with Gemini 2.0. So it's going to be one of their frontier models that they're going to be using for this. So it'll have the best in responses around it. Now, this is just starting to roll out in the US. And then obviously we'll continue going further. Now, I bring this up, one, to create awareness to it. So if all of a sudden you go to Google and you're like, what the heck is this? You're not caught off guard by it. But also to talk through some of the things that I think, as I read about the announcement, I wrestled with a little bit as I dug into what this actually means. Now, the first one has to do with some of the data usage and ethics around it. Now, anybody who knows Google or anything about search knows that a big part of, I was describing to my kids how search works today, because they're like, do you have to tell Google, you can be on Google? And I'm like, not really. They have basically these crawlers that crawl the internet and find everything and then organize and triage it. And of course, my daughter's like, ew, gross, like a centipede. I'm like, well, I mean, kind of. Yeah. But the whole thing with this is this starts to move into some interesting territory in that you think about Google search results. Pretty much everybody wants to show up in Google search results, right? I mean, I don't know many people who go, no, I create all this stuff and put it on the internet, but I don't want people to be able to find it. I mean, usually the point of creating it is so that it can be found. And people pay big bucks to be at the top. I mean, basically, if you're not on the first page of Google search, you don't exist, type of a thing. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but you know what I mean. So people pay big bucks for this, which opens up the whole thing of, okay, but that means AI now has to not only just know what's there so it can show up in a search result, it has to now be able to take what you put out there and then further train its AI to be able to contextualize it to include it in this AI mode so that it becomes part of its description. Now, you might go, yes, and what's your point, Christopher? Well, my point with that is this opens up a new can of worms, because if you think about some of the big debate right now about ethical use in AI training data is not everybody's consenting to have their data used in AI training. This starts to blur that line a little bit because you start to go, well, now maybe I have, let's say my Substack articles. Let's say I say those Substack articles are mine. I don't want that AI to be trained on that and then have it be, integrated into its responses. I don't want it to have my voice and my unique thoughts and all this other stuff helping train it. But now that's not just hey, I just don't want that incorporated into the AI training model. That now gets tied into, well, yeah, but then that's going to affect how its AI prioritizes and ranks you. And I don't know that they can actually turn that off because you would have to completely opt out of Google's crawlers. Like you'd basically have to say, I want to be obsoleted on the internet to not be included in AI's training data, specifically with Google. Now, I'm not going to get into, so are they doing that on purpose to get around some of these? Look, I'm not sitting at the table with them. If I was, I would have some things to say about how they approach it. But I do think this does start to open up the conversation around consent and the balance between what should AI, like what rights do you really have for content that you create and put on the internet? And what are you giving up or holding on to by saying, okay, well, if search is going to move towards being all about AI and AI is going to determine, if somebody looks for something, whether your stuff shows up or not is going to be dependent on how well it knows about your stuff, you can imagine some of the ethical lines it starts to cover where somebody says, well, I don't agree to training AI data on my stuff. And Google can have a little bit of a loophole now going, well, we're not officially training our data on this. We're just crawling it so it can be included in AI search. We don't necessarily have transparency into, well, how are you training it? Where? In what instances? How far does that go? Does that then make its way into Gemini as a whole? Is it limited just for search purposes? Like, how is that fragmented off and how are you doing that? I don't have the answers to that, and I don't think anybody does at this point. But that's one of the data usage and ethics questions this raises for me as I go, well, boy, if we're really going to AI search, this changes things a lot, which gives me to my second point, the impact this is going to have on web traffic and SEO. Like I said, people spend millions, probably billions if you were to add it all up, on making sure that their stuff is you want to be the number one hit when this search term is searched, you want to be all this other stuff. Well, now as we move into AI, this is going to change things a bit because now the way people find information about people could start to be different. Now, one of the things I think that is positive, I guess, about Google getting into this and leading the way with it is they really are the gold standard for search. I mean, there's a reason so many people invest in making sure they're at the top of the list of Google. But it does start to, raise, and this is a kind of a mix of the two of like, what does that look like in a new world? Like, are people paying more ad revenue now or more ad dollars so that AI specifically recommends them when somebody asks, and now you're the first thing it recommends? I don't know, but it also affects web traffic in terms of, well, maybe if your website was at the top of the search results list, does that now get buried because AI is going to be more cohesive in its description of things, and now you're just one of the mix? Like, it's going to be a big behavior change for people. I mean, like I said, for the most part, people say if you don't make the first page of Google, you don't exist. This could change for the good or the worse. If nothing, it's going to be very different. So maybe if you're a local business, and it's like somebody searches this topic in this area, I would think with Google and the data they have, it's going to feel very similar. So if you were to say, who is I have no idea, plumber in the Milwaukee area, I would think the results it would give you would be much more comprehensive, but we don't know yet. And I think this is one of the things that I don't think we fully understand the impact this is going to have on web traffic and SEO. I mean, it's one of the things that, just as a similar example to give you a comparison to, one of the reasons so many local businesses freaked out when there was talk of the TikTok ban was a lot of their foot traffic came from videos of people eating at their restaurant or, sending videos of this and that. And it drove a lot of things. And so all of a sudden it changed the way people found out about them. And so as you can imagine, people weren't going to the internet and going local hotspots, local dining hotspots on Google. They would go to TikTok and see, hey, what do I eat? Where do I eat here? And they'd watch videos of it. So of course you can see the behavior changed. People freaked out a little bit. This is the same kind of thing where it's like, well, how is this going to fit in? I don't have the answers to this yet, but it is something that if you are, whether you're a business owner, whether you're just a consumer, I think it is going to be important that we're aware that this shift is coming and it's going to hit us in a number of different ways. Now, this goes back to my third biggest concern with it, or just watch out, is the accuracy and trust of the information that we're getting. With the anthropomorphizing of AI, we already have an issue with people just believing what they're told. And then when all of a sudden a very powerful AI engine that sounds extremely human and talks in a very personalized manner tells you things, it just enhances the probability and the likelihood that you're going to believe what it says without actually double checking what it has to say. Now, this is especially problematic. I think it was maybe a month ago, I covered some research about how AI was performing in search, and its accuracy was not great. Perplexity was at the top of the list, but even they had like a 60% accuracy rate. I don't know when we get to this how well it's going to perform in terms of, how good is it at connecting the dots between somebody's ask and accurate results. Especially as people start getting into conversational things with search. How that's going to go, I don't know. And as people become just reliant on a summary of something, if you're looking for a specific restaurant or you're looking for a specific thing, you're probably not going to necessarily be quite as blindsided by this. But I've seen plenty of examples already where people have used AI search and have been frustrated because it's presented the wrong dates or it's told people the wrong, hours or whatever. And that's been very frustrating. I don't know how much Google's gone to actually clean up and ensure the accuracy and quality of its search as part of this. Now, I have to imagine they've had to do some work around it, because for them to be rolling this out on wide scale, let's just say Google hasn't had the best track record with some of its AI rollouts. So I don't know that I guess we'll see, but I don't know that they're really going to want to go big with Google AI search only to get just completely blown up as, it's giving the wrong results. It's saying the wrong things. It's pointing people in the wrong direction. I'm not sure how exactly that's going to happen. I also, going back to one of the transparency concerns, just last week, I talked about our inability to know how it's deciding what information it's giving. There's just not a real good way for transparency. And I think that's something even just business owners and things like that need to be aware of, is the fact that even if somebody says, oh, hey, you can pay to get your company boosted in AI search mode, so it'll be the recommendation of choice whenever these terms come into play. The thing is the data is clear. We aren't really good at figuring out how it comes to the conclusions it presents, and there's not going to be consistency with it. So I don't know that people are going to be able to deliver on that promise. Even if somebody comes and tells you, we can make sure that you will always be recommended when these terms are brought up, I'm just telling you, that's not a promise anybody really is going to be able to make because of how AI works. Now, I don't know exactly how well this is going to take off. I know that AI search has become much more popular. I know Perplexity has stolen a lot of attention from Google and just even search in general. So I do think this Google AI mode is their best, or one of their best efforts at kind of pulling people back and going, yeah, Perplexity is great, but hey, we've always been, or have been for, gosh, as long as I can remember, search. I mean, I remember the days before Google existed, but really once Google came on the scene, I mean, there's a reason people say I Googled it. And it's because maybe you use a different search engine sometimes, but for the most part, everybody went to Google. And so I do think this is their kind of attempt to say, nah, we're taking the reins back, and we will be the king of search, and we're going to adapt to AI search. We're going to be the leader in it. So again, some things to watch out for. And I'm hoping they'll release as part of this some of the data and some benchmarking on how they do, specifically on the accuracy of it. And I would love to see how they're using all the incredible data that they have, which truly is incredible. What they know and what they have, and just their ability to crawl the internet and find pretty much everything, and bring that together. So I actually think I'm actually happy that they're really kind of taking this seriously. It's just going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Now, the one thing though, going back to my first point, it's going to become very, very, I still talk to a lot of people who go, I don't want my data used in AI. I don't want it AI trained on me or what the stuff I create. That is going to become more and more problematic. Now, I'm not saying you have to do it. I'm just saying you do need to understand the implications of this. I was talking to somebody just the other week ago about it, and I was saying, it's going to become a point where if AI doesn't know who you are, that's really going to affect you, professionally, or even potentially personally. I mean, what AI knows about you is going to matter a lot. And that's where I've covered things before where, like, the information AI has had on somebody is wrong. They try and correct it. The only way they can correct it is to eliminate them as a record from AI, which just has potential catastrophic consequences. So yeah, all that to say, I'm really, really interested to see how this plays out. But that's what's going on. Like I said, it's rolling out this week. So some of you may have it now. If you go to Google and you see AI mode up at the top, that is Google's new thing. It's just in the US now. So to my global folks, you'll just have to wait a little bit longer. Some of that's just largely due to the AI governance around it. But all right, number 2, I thought this one was really, really interesting. So a company called Worldcoin rolled out what's called the Orb Mini, and it has to do with human verification. Now, this is something that OpenAI's CEO, Sam Altman, is heavily involved with. He has a partner, Alex Blania, I think. And basically, I saw the release video of this thing, and it's this little, it kind of looks creepy, to be honest with you. It's this little like iris scanner. It's this like mobile eye scanner to help people kind of, and get your eyes scanned. Like, are you a human? Is there an actual human behind this? And it's really designed to address this problem, this rising problem of, is this actually a person is there actually a person on the other end of this? And I'm going to talk a little bit about the implications of this, but I mean, it looks high tech. It looks, it's got these dual facing cameras. Look it up. Look up I highly encourage, look up Worldcoin's Orb Mini. You'll see this thing. It's a little silver chrome device. They've officially launched it. So it's launched in just 6 cities right now. And the goal with it is they're partnering up with, big financial institutions and some other things. I'll talk about the use cases for it. But it does raise this question of, okay, so like, yeah, my first thought on it was, this is an inevitable need. We're going to need to be able to verify a human is on the other end, and no longer just through the sense of like a CAPTCHA, pick all the stoplights. things like that. Because as AI gets more and more and more advanced, it can copy more of human behavior. And so a lot of the tests of, is there a human on the other side, just they're not holding up. As it becomes more sophisticated, being able to tell the difference between a person and a machine is becoming harder and harder. I mean, I've talked about the fact that there are AI avatars showing up to meetings with the AI voice of the person just interacting, and it's not even a real person. I mean, so when you start getting deeper into the age of distrust, people are starting to go, well, how do we know that there's actually a human being on the other side of this? And it's not just a very advanced bot. And so the proposed solution is this little optical scanner that you would hold up and beep, it scans you and says, yeah, Christopher is legit and he's actually somebody who's there. And, it's actually him behind this transaction or behind this type of a thing. And really the goal of it is to combat, bots and misinformation and digital fraud and all these other things. So kind of almost an authentication key for, hey, is there an actual human? And is it the actual human we think it is? Now, so it's inevitable. Okay. Now I'm not saying this Orb Mini is inevitable, because even as I think about some of the practical implications of this, I don't know that people are going to want to have to carry around yet another device they have to keep with them. I think of the early days of when, do you remember? I mean, some of you probably do, but remember when you had those little fobs? If you worked for a company that had a VPN, you'd have this little physical fob you had to keep on your person with you at all points. And, you would log in and you would have to have this little thing. And it was a way of just authenticating that, one, it was a real person. I don't think people were thinking about that because it was like, well, of course it's a real person. Nobody else is doing it. But it was, is it actually Christopher on the other end? And we know it's Christopher because Christopher has been issued this key fob. He not only has the password, but he has to then two-factor this with the key fob that he has with him. Now, we've seen how those have advanced. We've seen that two-factor now, sends you a text message, or you have an authenticator app on your phone. They've kind of integrated. I would anticipate we're going to see some of the same thing. I don't think it's going to be super practical, which is why I'm going to be interested to see how this thing rolls out. It's not going to be super practical to tell people, now in addition to your phone, you've got to carry around this little thing so you can, look into it before you, I don't know what, before you check out at Amazon.com, you got to scan your eyes on this device type of a thing. I don't know that that's going to be super practical, which is why I anticipate we'll start to see this technology start to embed into existing hardware that we have. Would I not be surprised if Worldcoin now creates the infrastructure and pretty soon they roll out with an app that you can get instead of having to buy their physical device? Possibly. I think that's, because they're already developing a token system. They're, WLD tokens that can be used to authenticate and, so you're already seeing the infrastructure being set up. I don't think the device is necessarily the thing to focus on. So if you look at this, if you look it up, like I said, I'd encourage you to look it up. But if you look it up and you go, that's stupid, nobody's going to do it, nobody's going to buy one of these things, I don't think you're wrong that, I don't anticipate it's going to be something that everybody else is carrying around another device, or there's a little mini version of it you keep on your keychain type of a thing. I would say if this kind of thing is going to take off, it's going to be integrating into our existing ecosystem of hardware. Breaking into the hardware space is extremely, extremely difficult. But could Worldcoin become the universal standard for authentication? I think that's going to become extremely competitive. And I think that's one of the things these folks are ahead of the game on, is they're trying to go, we're going to be the standard for human identity verification. We will be the name in that. And they've got a relatively good head start on it, even if their device is a little, goofy. Now, this was the thing that immediately where my head went with it was, this raises all sorts of privacy and regulatory concerns around, okay, well, geez, you're doing biometric scanning, and what happens to those images, and where does that data go, and who actually owns that data, and how is it being used? What if there's a breach? All of a sudden now people have biometric data. Could they then steal my actual human verification identity? Because if they steal your human verification identity, we're going to have to go back to like hugs. And even that with humanoid robots might not hold up anymore. Because I don't know, I did hug them. They did feel pretty real. But I don't know. Maybe that was a clone version of their via bot. Like, this really does start to open up some Black Mirror stuff real quick, where you go, okay. And going back to, and this is why I think the fight over being the standard is going to become extremely competitive, because it's going to become like, well, if you're the one who is the standard, then everybody's going to get on board. So the fact they have Visa and a lot of these things coming into play does hold some weight, but I still don't have any information, and really could not find much on the privacy and regulatory concerns around it. The challenge is the people who go, this is dumb, it needs to go away. I don't think that's true. I don't think the answer is we get rid of this kind of thing, because it is going to become increasingly problematic to be able to know, is it who you think it is on the other end of that? Now, I think we have to be careful, because I think sometimes we care way too much about, is it really the person on the other end, when it's like, well, I mean, for this instance, it doesn't matter. In this instance, it does. Here again, just opens up another can of worms of, we haven't really defined when does it matter to actually do human verification and when does it not. I don't know when that really matters. What is the line for that? And I think everybody's going to have different opinions on it, and every company is going to have certain things. I can see, well, we'll get into this in a minute. But I can see companies and employers and all these other things fighting over when and where they need human identification and human verification. But there's just a lot of risk associated with having a single database for all human verification, when that could easily be breached, and what are the data handling practices around it? To me, this opened up more questions than it gave answers, but it was one of those things where it was one of the first things I saw where I went, okay, we're here. It's, in some ways, there's comfort that one of the leaders in AI is involved in it, in that it's like, well, you do understand what AI is capable of, so you're also going to understand how to distinguish between what a human is and what AI is. On the other end, it's a little unnerving to be like, so the guy who's involved with creating the thing that's creating the problem is also the one who's involved with creating the solution to the problem he created. Like I said, it gave me lots of discomfort around it. And I don't share it to freak people out, but because we do need this. This is going to be an inevitability that we're going to have to cross this line. It's just a question of, will it actually look like a device like what we see? I don't think so. I think that's where we're at now, to try and show the proof of concept, to get people to kind of ooh and ah around it. If the goal is, I think it's going to integrate in with other infrastructure. Is this human verification going to continue? Yeah. And is it going to look something like this? Whether it's optical scanning, whether it's, something that detects there is a warm body, a physical, soul-filled body on the other end of this transaction. Yes. Will this be the one? I don't know. Now, some people have asked when I brought this up, because just like anything I talk about, I end up bringing it up in conversations with people along the way. People have said, like, well, where do you even see this popping up? I think anything today where you see, you need online identity verification, like, is this actually you? I could see a world where, to process your taxes, you actually have to do some sort of human authentic identification to say, yes, this is actually me approving and authenticating this. And you can see where this could be a really good thing. Tax fraud is a major issue. Big financial transactions. You go to buy a house, and so much of this stuff is done online. Hey, we need to make sure that it actually is Christopher Lind who is authorizing this identification for this loan, for this mortgage, whatever. We need to make sure it's actually him. The days of, well, he is here. We looked at his passport and his driver's license and we scanned this thing. I mean, I remember when we bought the house, our house now, it was so stupid. I'm like, I had to drive a couple hours just so somebody could photocopy my driver's license. And then I left. I'm like, this is really dumb, but I also understand it. So could something like this make that better? Yeah. I think one of the ones that's really interesting is the integration into social platforms. As people start to go, is this an actual human verified? Like, is there an actual human on the other end of this? Or is this a totally fake bot account? I think we will start to see standards on social, like real human. I mean, whether it'll look like that or some whatever cheesy things in my head, probably not. But do I think that there will be a verified human badge associated with people who have been verified as a real human? I already see this. LinkedIn has a thing where it's like verified something that proves like this is an actual like we verified they are an actual person who exists. Doesn't necessarily mean everything they post or everything they put out there is actually put there by them, but it does mean that this person is an actual person and not just completely made up. Somebody just didn't go make up John Doe account and create a LinkedIn. The other one I thought was really interesting was online dating apps. And some of their early adopters for this are online dating apps, which I thought was a very interesting but practical example of where this would make sense, which, could be tied into social, but in a different way, where it's like, hey, and that could be a real competitive edge for a dating app to say everybody on our app is a verified human being. We have verified who they are. Now, again, where I see there being danger with that is believing that, okay, you verified they're a real human, but have you verified any of the other information? You could see where this badge could give some level of authority that it doesn't necessarily reasonably carry. I don't know. Something to be watching for, though, and I do think human verification identification is going to become a big thing. I think this is going to become huge when it comes to employers, and not for good reasons. In my opinion, an employer should just trust their employees largely, but I think we're going to see employers start to jump on this bandwagon too. We're going to need people to scan in for work and scan out of work type of a thing to verify, like, hey, did you actually start your day, or did you just set your bots up and hit play? But we'll see. We'll see where it goes. All right. This other one, number 3, was interesting. I came across an article. I can't remember if it was Futurism or TechCrunch, but it referenced an article on Rolling Stone that was talking about this increase in instances of people reporting that people they know are they're just becoming delusional with beliefs that are heavily influenced by AI chatbots. So in essence, people are taking the red pill with these chatbots, and all of a sudden they're talking about new levels of consciousness. They're talking about, psychological distress and the conspiracies. And they're really going deep down the rabbit hole. Now, it was funny. I happened to be preparing my notes for recording this, and also just came across a 60 Minutes documentary on, it's not limited to Australia, but this happened to be 60 Minutes Australia, that was all about this rise of people falling in love with their chatbots, which I think, again, is the same kind of effect where people are getting drawn in to AI in ways that is not healthy at all. And it is amplifying it. So the Rolling Stones report on this, but literally the examples were, I read them and I'm like, yeah, it kind of makes sense. It's what I've been saying we have to watch out for big time. Now, I want to break it down because I see lots of stuff related to this where people go off the deep end and they're convinced AI is, some sort of evil entity on the other side, or, people give it more credit than what it is. And we don't like to go, this is actually an us problem. This isn't I'll be careful how I say it. I'm not saying it's just an us problem. It is also the tech and how the tech companies are using it and marketing it and, allowing it to be used. So it is that. But where we really start to see this go off the deep end is really, it's something broken on the inside with us. And going back to this anthropomorphism of AI, it becoming more and more and more human-like. There's what's called the ELIZA effect, which is essentially a cognitive bias where really, when we start to see human characteristics in things that aren't always there. And AI is just turning the volume up on this to 11. So what we don't always recognize, because we see this like human characteristic, which what do we see in humans? Well, we see them empathize with us. We see them support and agree and want to help expand our thinking or help us understand things that we're concerned about or comfort us or, all these different things. Well, all of a sudden, when AI can mimic that, we start to believe that that's what AI is doing. And so it can start to reinforce our biases. It can start to make us think, hey, this is something you really need to watch out for. Not realizing this is something I'm looking for, and AI is just trying to help us accomplish what it thinks we want. But because we start to see it as another human being and we think it cares and it has feelings and it has the same concerns we do, we don't realize like AI is not going to go, yo, Christopher, you're off the deep end, buddy. You need to stop. Get off your phone right now. Please, you have gone too far. AI is not going to do that because AI doesn't care about you. It's not another human being. It doesn't have feelings. It doesn't have emotions. It's there to meet your needs. And I said this last week. I will continue saying that AI, while it might do it in a different way or whatever, it's really designed to give you what you want. So what we're seeing now is we're starting already to see the negative effects of this just start to go gangbusters. And I am telling you, my prediction is this is only going to get worse. So these stories I read in Rolling Stone of these people who seemed normal and all of a sudden they got, really involved with AI and suddenly they're saying they've had spiritual experiences or they've finally uncovered hidden knowledge and they're believing some of these just crazy, crazy, crazy things and then you look at their conversation threads and you're like, buddy, this isn't AI has not unlocked your mind. It's literally fed your delusions to the point where you've gone completely off the deep end. This is going to become a bigger and bigger problem. But again, it's tough because you can go, well, that's AI's fault. And I think tech does hold some responsibility for it. But I think it's also important that we don't just go, well, it's AI. So either we use AI or we don't use AI, or we yell at the AI companies to fix AI. Some of these things can't be fixed. Some of these things are inherent to the design of artificial intelligence. There's no way around it. You can't just say, well, make AI care, make AI have feelings. It doesn't. Well, make AI have standards. Well, whose standards? Based on what? In what situations? The possibilities are infinite. And so you quickly realize that, yes, tech companies can do more, but they can't necessarily solve it. Now, what I think we need to be careful of with this is that the tech companies don't do what they did with social media and just go, not our problem. If people go crazy because they use AI, we had nothing to do with it. That's on them. I don't think that's helpful. But I do think we do need to look in the mirror and take some responsibility, which is why, in terms of kind of risks to watch for in yourself, if you are using AI for emotional support, I am telling you right now, watch out. If you start becoming emotionally connected and enmeshed and dependent on AI, any vulnerabilities you have are going to get just eviscerated because AI will just exploit the snot out of this stuff. So be so so careful in this. And this is why one of the reasons I keep pushing back on this whole AI is becoming sentient. AGI is real, ASI is real. The more we start to believe that this AI is something bigger than it really is, the more vulnerable we become to believing it understands me, it knows me, it wants to help me. No, it doesn't. It is a mathematical algorithm that is designed to do what it's asked within the parameters that it's been given. That's what it is. No matter how advanced, no matter how good, no matter how many PhDs it can get, all this other stuff, it is still an AI algorithm. It is not sentient. It does not care about you. It does not feel anything. And believing that it does, or even starting to believe maybe it could, will make you exponentially more vulnerable to falling for some of this stuff. And like I said, the emotional support. Listen, I've even shared, I wrote a whole Substack article about how I used AI to emotionally process a situation. However, I was not emotionally dependent on it in that process. I recognized the role that it had. Its role was not to be my emotional support system. Its role was to recognize patterns and identify things and reframe them in a way that I could emotionally process and process in community with other people who knew me. I was very clear on the role that it had. I did not see AI as this friend to help me through this difficult experience. I saw AI as a tool to help me process the complexity of the experience so I could process it emotionally and process it in community with others. So it might seem like I'm splitting hairs, but I'm really, really not. And it really, truly is something that you need to be relentlessly intentional about. And you can't just go, oh, Christopher, you're just overthinking this. This is just the tip of the iceberg for some of the things we're seeing. If we thought social media wreaked havoc on the mental health of people, we ain't seen nothing yet. We have not seen even the beginning of this. And I think that's where the human relationship piece is still so key. It's so key. As much of a tech head as I am, I still have so much value on the tight-knit circle of human people that I keep in my life, that I interact with. And for me, that's a huge part of why my faith is such an important part. Is my faith isn't, with some sentient being off in the distance. It's a very personal relationship, and for a reason. And I think, whether you subscribe to that worldview or not, what you can subscribe to is I at least need to have physical people in my life to help keep me grounded on this. Or some of this stuff, it will happen to you. It's not a matter of when, or no, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. If you do not fortify your walls, this is going to happen to you, and there's just no way around it. So in terms of just like some proactive things, like honestly, some of the perspective I'm sharing right now, just remember what AI really is. Be really intentional about recognizing the role it plays. It's why I speak so much about, hey, be careful where you put it. Be careful how you use it. Be careful how you frame it. Be careful how much you rely on it. Like all this stuff, limit your time with it. I think that's one of the other things that I consistently see as a pattern is people will get involved in, they wouldn't even describe it as a emotional relationship with AI. They start having these conversations, and pretty soon they're kind of like isolating themselves from other people, and they have this like secret life with AI. And yeah, maybe it starts as we just talk about, let's talk about the conspiracies of what's happening with, you name this global conflict, and pretty soon it starts expanding, and you don't talk to other people about it, and you don't have those people in your life who go, whoa, hey, you're going too far. And AI is not going to tell you that. And so just please be careful with this, because this problem is only going to expand. And like I said, go look up the article in the Rolling Stone, check it out, and you'll see. Just Google people developing delusions as a result of AI. It's one of the top hits and trends this week. All right. Last one, and then I'll call it a day. This one I don't think it's quite as new. It's relatively new, but by the time I saw it, I was like, oh, that happened like, several weeks ago. So it's not exactly like cutting edge. But one of the things I saw this picture pop up that was clearly this hand-drawn picture. So I looked into the story, and basically this mom, Priya Aman, she's a founder of a company called Flexible. Her son drew this picture, and I very much can relate to what she went through when she saw it. It's this picture of, like kids do, man, they are truth tellers. They will just say things. And it's the kid is kind of off in the side of the picture, and he's saying something to the mom, like asking about something. And she's on the other side of the picture, sitting at a desk, furiously type. I mean, it's a stick drawing. So you're not going to be seeing, Picasso in this, but it's pretty clear what's going on. Kids, there's clearly distance between the kid and the mom. The kid is asking for something, and the mom's response is basically like, no, in the picture, I'm busy, type of a thing. And so this mom got this picture. And again, the kid, based on what you can tell from the story, and I just know this from having 8 kids, like they're not doing it to make you have this like heart-found look in the mirror moment. They're just drawing what they see. And so that's what this kid did. Her son drew what he observed, which was whenever he interacts with his mom, she's busy on her computer and doesn't have time. And again, it wasn't to make her feel bad or say, you're a crappy mom. It just was, hey, mommy, I drew you a picture. And she had a reaction to it, a positive one. If you look into the story, I actually have a lot of respect for how she handled it. And I think that's kind of one of the biggest things. She really took this seriously and really reinvestigated and decided to make some changes based on this. But what I respected about this was it just brought to mind for me, whether we're talking about AI, whether we're talking about work-life balance, whether we're talking about death, mortality, like whatever it is, we often have a really negative reaction when something we don't like or don't want to see in ourselves is held up. When a mirror is held up to us and we don't like what we see in it, we don't always respond well. And a lot of times we will deny it, we'll make excuses, we'll flip it back around, we'll put the blame on the other person. And I think about how she could have responded to her kid. She could have gotten mad. She could have argued with her kid that, that's not what mommy does, type of a thing, where the kid probably would have been like very confused because they're not having the emotional reaction to it. They're like, I just drew a picture of what I see every day. And so she could have reacted to that in a really negative way. And I respect the fact that she didn't. She actually took it, sat with it, which is honestly one of the really hard things to do. And then she also used it and turned it into a learning opportunity for herself, for her kids, for the people around her. The fact it's making its way around different articles and things like that. What she's doing with this experience, I think, is something we all can take a step back from and go, how well do I do that? When I'm faced with something about myself, I don't want to hear, what do I do? Do I have a reaction where I actually process it? I sit with it. I evaluate, hey, is there merit and truth to this? And be willing to answer that question honestly. And then based on the answer, am I willing to do something with it? Because I would say that is not our default response. It's not mine. It's not anybody I've ever talked to who goes, yeah, you know what? When I'm told something I don't like or makes me uncomfortable, the first thing I do is I just sit with that and go, man, is there truth to that? You know what? Where is that showing up in my life? That's not our default posture. And so reading this, I have a lot of respect for what she did with it because she could have handled it very different. And I think that's something that we all can take into play and not just related to work-life balance or raising kids. I mean, this is true with anything. Somebody brings something to your attention related to your political views or, a specific topic. Do you blow your stack? Make them feel like garbage for even bringing it up? Maybe they just were asking a follow-up question. I was thinking about this of an example that came up. I was talking with somebody the other day and we were just talking about the fact that sometimes like people are literally just asking a follow-up question because they're confused. Like you said something and they're like, so do you mean this? And we interpret that as you're challenging my whole thing. And we just blow back up at them and be like, you obviously don't care about that. Or we get super defensive instead of recognizing maybe there's just something that isn't coming through clearly, or maybe I am not fully accurately representing the situation, or maybe I haven't thought through these things. And that self-reflection, that pause, that reframing, we cannot underestimate the value of doing that. And I think this was a really good example, while specific to a mom who's working home. Like, I think that's something we can all walk away from. Now, the other thing with this was, I think it continues to highlight some of the real risks we run into as we further integrate our work with our personal lives, and really much even bigger than that, kind of use our professional lives to form a key part of our identity. Now, one of the things that's been interesting in some of the conversations I've had about it this week, going back to my first point, this is where I'm like, not the point, but I've had some people engage with it and go, see, this is why people need to be in the office, because if people were in the office, we wouldn't have moments like this. And I've had to push back and go, that is not true. That is not actually the case. On the surface, it seems that way. It would be easy to say, yeah, see, if you weren't working from home, this wouldn't happen, because you'd go off to an office, then you would come home. I just look at that and I go, so then instead the kid would draw a picture of being with their nanny or their daycare person. Is that any better of a picture? You know, if your kid just goes, well, now you're just not in my life at all, versus, well, you're in it, but you're not present. That's not a better solution, just to be clear. That doesn't solve things. So that's where one of the things that I just went, no, the solution to things like this is not go into the office. And even the people I know who go into the office, even in the days when I went into the office, this still was challenging. We have smartphones. We have mobile access to our devices. We all use laptops that we take to and from work with us. People have an expectation they can get a hold of you whenever. We have text messages. So this idea that, yeah, well, you know, if we just kept work at work, then things would be better. Work doesn't stay at work. It never has. As long as we've had technology that made it possible not to have to work from work, it's been an issue. And even if we could completely contain work at work, we just end up spending more hours at work, or, you know, other things. So I think we just need to really focus, again, going back to this, like, hey, can we pause and actually address the issue? And I'm not telling anybody this is what your solution is. That's work you have to do. You have to figure out, well, maybe going into an office would be good. Maybe you are so integrated, you need that space. Okay, maybe that's the case. Maybe you need to leave your phone and your laptop at work so it doesn't follow you home. But that doesn't necessarily fix it if it's still clogging your head. And so even when your kid or your spouse is talking to you, you're like, but you're really thinking about tomorrow, it doesn't help. And I think that's where all of us have to do this hard work of going, all right, the lines between work and personal life and the demands of work just keep rising. What do we do to draw lines to help protect us, to protect the next generation? And all of this stuff, because this isn't just about protecting ourselves and our immediate term. This is about the impact and how we're shaping future generations, and how the next generation thinks about what matters and what doesn't matter, and where they should be spending their time and how they should be spending their time. This is much more than a quarter to quarter, month to month problem that we need to think about. You know, it really is about making sure that we're living with a level of intentionality where we go, is my career my everything? And if I say no, does my life actually look like that? Like, would somebody from the outside looking at it agree with me? And not just because somebody from the outside goes, I don't agree with that, you'd necessarily have to make all the changes they say. But if somebody from the outside says, I mean, it does seem like you really, all you care about is work. Do we get mad and throw it back in their face and go, well, you know, work is really good. You know, what about you? You think you're so great? Or do we go, okay, tell me more about that. Where does that show up? Why do you think that? And have I actually done the work to think about that, consider it, and evaluate the truth behind that statement or not? So yeah, it was a very kind of profound moment for me as I watched it, because I think about some of the choices I make with my family to fight against things like this from happening. Now, my kids still sometimes will say things that make me go, oh, yeah, you're right. You know, oh, Daddy, you're in meetings a lot. Oh, you're right, I am. You know, and so how do I think about that honestly? and, not necessarily go, I'm not going to do meetings anymore. That's not realistic. But how do I think about that and combat it in a healthy way? And I think that's something all of us have to do, whether it's to combat being too enmeshed with your work, whether it comes to becoming too attached to AI, whether it becomes losing yourself in a digital world that doesn't really care about you. I think it's important. So with that, I hope you have a great week, a great weekend, and we will see you on the other side.